Well, we just got a huge update in the Rittenhouse trial, which hasn't officially started yet. I believe they're right at the end of the jury selection process, and I had been not super concerned about the outcome of the Rittenhouse trial because it was my understanding that Robert Barnes was helping out and putting together a team for jury selection. A bunch of people, body language experts. He was going to have Richard Barris analyze and profile all the potential jurors. They were going to, present data about how biased the jury pool was, and all these great things, which are very important in a case like Rittenhouse's that has been plastered all over TV, and it's impossible to find jurors who had never heard of the case. And if they said they'd never heard of the case, they were lying. And as Richard Barris's polling found, apparently 2/3 of potential jurors in Kenosha County, Wisconsin, already think that Rittenhouse is guilty of murder, and essentially they would lynch him if they make it onto the jury. So it would take a lot of hard work and a lot of smart people to filter out those 2/3 of the population who already absolutely want Rittenhouse dead, who want him to fry, to find the 1/3 of the population who might be open to letting him live. And apparently, right on the eve of the jury selection process, Barnes and all of his acolytes, all the people who he had, brought in to try and work on this jury selection process on behalf of Kyle Rittenhouse and his main attorneys, they were all shut out, including Rich Barris, and they wouldn't even look at the data that Barris had assembled for them, that all the work that he had put in, which Barnes apparently had paid for out of pocket. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of personal stuff behind the scenes, and I don't want to get into that or pick sides with that, even though obviously I'm biased in favor of, liking Barnes. I get a lot of, what's a good term? I get a lot of value out of his analysis on various different things, and I think that he has a lot of what he has said has panned out. And so I appreciate his input when it comes to, when him and Viva Frei talk about legal cases. I watch their show every Sunday. And I thought that Barnes and Richard Barris completely hit it out of the park with the 2020 election, and they called most of the problems that we had with the 2020 election beforehand. They were not just people who came in as sore losers on the day after and said, "Oh, Trump lost, so it must have been rigged." No, they were talking about what all the problems were legally and practically with how the election was being carried out, and all of the corners that were being cut with regards to election integrity, justified by the so-called pandemic. And so these are people who I find quite credible. So when they come in and they essentially say, Kyle's done, pray that his soul finds peace, that's pretty black-pilling. These guys basically think at this point, since the jury selection process was completely blown up, that Kyle will need a miracle at this point if he wants to come out of this. Now, could he win on appeal? Yes. But it would take a lot of luck at this point for Kyle to end up with jurors who will actually presume him innocent and aren't already convinced that he's guilty. Because here's the thing: people who want to lynch Kyle Rittenhouse, just like the people who wanted to lynch Derek Chauvin. And again, I don't like Derek Chauvin, not a fan of him, but I don't think he got a fair trial. I think that's obvious when you see that the jurors beforehand were already, posting things on social media about, how much they were not in favor of him. When you see stuff like that, you know that somebody didn't get a fair trial, because jurors are supposed to be impartial. And here's the thing: somebody who is truly biased is not going to tell you that, because they're going to say, no, I'm not biased at all, because they want to get on the jury and make sure that this guy fries, if they truly believe that they're a bad person. That's what any reasonable person would do. You care much more about justice, if you're already convinced somebody's guilty, you care more about that, about getting justice, than you do about the integrity of the jury trial process. So even if the guy doesn't get a fair trial, if you're already convinced that he's guilty, that's justifiable, because you want to make sure that the guilty people are punished. And so what likely has happened is Kyle Rittenhouse's defense attorney, would walk up to these jurors and he would say, "Are you biased against my client?" And they would go, "Oh, no, sir, not at all, not me." And he'd go, "Oh, okay, good. We'll leave you on the jury." And there's a bunch of people, probably the vast majority of them, if not all 8, are already ready to flip the switch themselves and make him dance. And I'm making you, I'm alluding to the electric chair. I'm not sure if they have the death penalty in Wisconsin or if they still have the electric chair, but I believe the mandatory minimum for murder in Wisconsin is life in prison. So either way, pretty grim sentence. And so it looks at this point that Rittenhouse, well, this is going to be terrible precedent, but it's imperative that Rittenhouse smartens up and lets good people, good smart people, represent him on appeal when he loses, which apparently seems to be the odds at this point that he's definitely going to lose and will get, at a minimum, life in prison. Kyle's only hope at this point is that somehow a real pro-Kyle zealot made it onto the jury, lied his way onto the jury as well, and is willing to hold out at the end and not capitulate and refuse to vote guilty, in which case there will be a mistrial declared. That's what happens when the jury cannot reach a unanimous verdict. So all Kyle needs is one guy on the jury who will hold out for him. Now, that's a tough thing. You don't really have that. That's not a common personality thing. When you're locked in a room with all these other jurors and all these jurors want to lynch some guy, you don't want to be the one holdout. Especially if you live in a town where 2/3 of the people already want this guy to fry. When it leaks out, and it will leak out who you are and how you voted, and the fact that you're the reason why this kid is still alive, why this kid is not spending the rest of his life in prison, your community will turn on you. That juror's life will be destroyed. This is the problem they had in the Chauvin trial. There were people who were scared to be on the jury because they knew, hey, I'm afraid if I end up thinking that Chauvin should not be convicted as charged, it'll destroy my life, and I don't want to live that way. And so the only people who felt comfortable going on the jury were the people who were going to pick the popular position, which was guilty. And that's why the jury deliberated for something like half an hour. It was a nominal deliberation. They didn't really deliberate anything. And we likely will see something very similar in Kyle's case here. And that's sad. Because this is much more important than the Chauvin case. I mean, Chauvin, yes, it was a travesty of justice in that it was a sham trial. But I'm not shedding any tears for Chauvin personally. I'm not shedding any tears for cops being prosecuted. But the process itself was a sham. It was a third world justice system. It was not. It was not a trial that a country that believes in the rule of law should be proud of. But with Rittenhouse, this is on a whole other level, because Rittenhouse, in this case, self-defense itself is on trial. Rittenhouse is on video defending himself, and it's pretty darn clear that there's no way you can look at the video of Rittenhouse being chased by armed men, having his gun grabbed, having people try and seize his weapon away from him. In which case he finally fires at the people who have their hands on his gun. And you have another guy who tries to beat him over the head with a skateboard. He shoots that guy. Another guy with a Glock who would get shot. If you can't look at that situation and recognize that self-defense, if that can't hold up in court as self-defense, there is no self-defense in this country. And that's why so many good people, so many smart people were willing to help Kyle out for little or no money. And certainly, apparently, no money up front, even people who wanted money. because they understood this is such an important case. Because the precedent, if Rittenhouse fries for this, it's going to destroy self-defense for all of us. And so it's very important that Rittenhouse is found innocent. Which is why I say at this point, hopefully, Rittenhouse will allow decent people to represent him on appeal. The issue that he's, and this is real dark stuff, what Barnes's theory is, and again, this is just one guy's word, but it's somebody who I generally trust at this point. He seems to think that the fund that that raised a bunch of money for Kyle's defense, where if people wanted to donate money to Kyle Rittenhouse, that went into like this, this fund trust thing, and apparently Kyle and his family do not control that money. There is some third party, some guy, I can't remember his name, Daniel Hancock, maybe, something like that. He controls the money. And so, all the attorneys and things are paid out of this fund, all of Kyle's, living expenses, because obviously he can't work because he's a pariah in his own community. I'm sure he lost his job immediately, even though he was there, ironically, at the behest of his boss to protect the business. I'm sure there was no loyalty there. People, he can't go out in public, got a bunch of death threats, so he can't support himself. So he's getting support out of money by this fund, but he and his family do not control it. And so they're kind of, hostages of this Hancock guy, at least it would appear, according to Barnes. Allegedly. I say this all allegedly. And none of this is my opinion, so don't sue me. But apparently this fund is getting sued because for, I don't know, false advertising or something like that, to where people who were misled and thought, hey, we thought the Rittenhouse family actually controlled all this money, and it's actually just a slush fund for this other guy. And so because of all this, because Kyle doesn't seem to have any agency as a human being, I don't want to go quite and make Britney Spears comparisons yet, but it's kind of starting to look like that. It is kind of starting to look like the Britney situation. Because of that, he might get life in prison. That's what it looks like. Because according to Barnes, he and all of his people were kicked off this case and were shut out of the process and were denied access to visit Rittenhouse without supervision from this guy who owns this trust. After Barnes started asking questions about, hey, all this money, isn't the family supposed to control this? When he started asking questions about that, that's when Barnes says, all of a sudden, he and all of the jury selection people were froze out. And so these guys appear to be throwing the case. Again, this is based on Barnes's account. So I don't want to get sued for saying any of this. But this is the information that we have right now. They're willing to throw the case in order to conceal whatever is going on with the money. And so that's very sad. I pity this kid, and I pity America, because our right to self-defense should not be shredded because of the greed of a few individuals, and of course, obviously, the malice of the prosecutor. But you have to expect that. Prosecutors are generally bad people. You can never take the goodwill of any authority figure for granted. Anyone who has power over you, you should expect that they're going to use it and abuse it to its fullest extent to cause you as much pain as possible. Always assume that when you're around a police officer. Always assume that when it comes to prosecutors, when it comes to school principals, when it comes to teachers, and when it comes to school teachers. If you have kids in school. Obviously, we're seeing that with the school board members recently. Anyone who has power over you is going to use it to try and harm you, because that's what they do. That's what powerful people do. I mean, that's why everybody loves firefighters. Firefighters don't have any power to hurt people. They only have the ability to help people. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow. I will do an update, I guess, later next time there's any real Rittenhouse news on this. Or at the end of the trial when he is likely going to be convicted of something, at the very least. But, we can always pray for a mistrial. So with that said, I I'll see folks back here tomorrow for real this time. No more rambling.